Marcus Wellington III had everything money could buy. His penthouse overlooked the city's glittering skyline. His garage housed 7 luxury cars, and his bank account had more zeros than most people could count. At 35, he was the CEO of Wellington Industries, a company his grandfather had built from nothing. Marcus wore custom suits that cost more than some people's annual salary and ate at restaurants, where a single meal could feed a family for weeks. But Marcus had one problem that money couldn't solve. He was lonely. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone, because Marcus was rarely alone. He was surrounded by business associates, employees, and people who called themselves friends. The problem was that Marcus knew exactly why these people stayed close to him. They wanted something from him. His money, his connections, his influence. Nobody seemed to care about Marcus the person, only Marcus the millionaire. This bitter truth had made Marcus cynical about people, especially about love and relationships. He had dated many women over the years, but each relationship ended the same way. Once the novelty of his wealth wore off, he would discover that his girlfriend was more interested in his credit card than his heart. Some wanted expensive gifts, others wanted him to pay for their lifestyle, and a few even tried to get pregnant, hoping to secure a lifetime of financial support. Marcus had 3 close friends from his college days: Richard, James, and David. These men had also become successful in their own fields, but none had achieved Marcus's level of wealth. They met every month at an exclusive club downtown, sharing drinks and stories about their lives. During these meetings, Marcus often complained about his dating life and his belief that no woman could ever love him for who he truly was, not what he owned. On a cold December evening, the 4 friends gathered at their usual table in the club's private dining room. The conversation, as it often did, turned to Marcus's pessimistic views on love and relationships. Marcus was particularly bitter that night because his latest girlfriend had just broken up with him after he refused to buy her a diamond necklace worth $50,000. "I'm telling you guys, it's impossible," Marcus said, swirling the expensive whiskey in his glass. "Every woman I meet sees dollar signs when she looks at me. Nobody cares about the real me. They just want to live the high life and spend my money." Richard, who was slightly drunk, laughed loudly. "Come on, Marcus. You're being dramatic. Not every woman is like that. There are plenty of good women out there who would love you for who you are, not what you have." Marcus shook his head firmly. "No, Richard. You don't understand because you're not in my position. When you have this much money, people change around you. Even the sweetest woman becomes greedy when she sees what I can offer." James joined the conversation. "Marcus, maybe the problem is where you're meeting these women. You're always at fancy parties, expensive restaurants, and high-end social events. Of course you're going to meet materialistic women there. What about meeting someone ordinary, someone who doesn't even know about your wealth?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "It doesn't matter where I meet them. Once they find out who I am, they all become the same. Gold diggers, every single one." David, who had been quiet until now, suddenly had an idea that would change everything. "You know what, Marcus? You're so convinced that all women are the same. Why don't we test your theory?" Marcus looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" David leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "I bet you that there are women out there who would marry you even if you had nothing. Women who would love you without knowing about your money." "That's impossible," Marcus replied immediately. "No woman would marry a man who appears to have nothing to offer." "Want to bet on it?" David challenged. "I bet you $1 million that I can find a woman who will marry you without knowing about your wealth. Someone who will say yes to your proposal even when she thinks you're poor." Marcus was intrigued despite himself. $1 million meant nothing to him, but the challenge was interesting. "How would you even do that? It's not like you can hide who I am. My face has been in magazines and newspapers." David had thought this through. "Easy. We find someone who doesn't read business magazines or follow social media much. Someone who lives in a completely different world from ours. And you'll have to play a role, dress down, act like you're struggling financially, maybe even claim you're unemployed." Richard and James were getting excited about the idea. "This could actually work," James said. "Marcus, you're always saying no woman would want you if you were poor. Here's your chance to prove it." Marcus felt a strange mixture of excitement and skepticism. Part of him wanted to prove his cynical worldview correct, but another part secretly hoped to be proven wrong. "And where exactly are you planning to find this woman who supposedly doesn't care about money?" David smiled. Leave that to me. I have some ideas. There are places in this city where people are more concerned with survival than with designer handbags. Places where genuine human connection might still exist. Marcus considered the proposal. The bet was intriguing, but more than that, he was curious to see if such a woman actually existed. In his heart, he desperately wanted to believe that someone could love him for who he truly was, but his experiences had made him doubt it was possible. Fine, Marcus said finally. I'll take your bet. $1 million says that any woman, no matter how poor or desperate, will eventually show her true colors once she thinks she can get something from me. Even if I pretend to be poor, she'll try to use me somehow. David extended his hand. Deal, but there are rules. You have to genuinely try to win this woman over. You can't sabotage the relationship just to win the bet. You have to act like you really want to marry her. Marcus shook David's hand. Deal. But when this fails, I want all three of you to admit that I was right about women all along. The four friends spent the rest of the evening planning Marcus's transformation and discussing where they might find the perfect candidate for their experiment. None of them could have predicted that this cruel bet, born from cynicism and alcohol, would lead to consequences none of them saw coming. Marcus went home that night feeling excited for the first time in months. Finally, he would have definitive proof that his cynical view of human nature was correct, or so he thought. 3 days after making the bet, David called Marcus with news. He had found the perfect candidate. Her name was Elena Rodriguez, and she was 28 years old. David had spent those 3 days researching and observing, and Elena seemed to fit all their requirements perfectly. Elena had been living on the streets for 6 months after losing her job as a nurse's assistant when the small clinic where she worked couldn't afford to pay her anymore. She had no family to turn to, having aged out of the foster care system years earlier. Despite her difficult circumstances, David had observed something remarkable about Elena. She spent her days at the public library, not just seeking warmth, but actually reading books and helping elderly visitors navigate the computer system. In the evenings, she volunteered at a soup kitchen, serving food to other homeless people even though she barely had enough to eat herself. She's perfect, Marcus, David explained over the phone. She doesn't own a smartphone, rarely watches television, and definitely doesn't read business magazines. She has no idea who you are. Plus, she seems genuinely kind. Yesterday, I saw her give her only sandwich to an old man who looked hungrier than she did. Marcus felt a strange twist in his stomach when David described Elena's kindness. For a moment, he almost felt guilty about what they were planning to do. But then he reminded himself that this was just an experiment to prove his point about human nature. Once Elena thought she could gain something from him, she would show her true colors just like all the others. David continued. There's more. She's beautiful, Marcus. I mean, really beautiful. Even living on the streets, even wearing old clothes and having messy hair, she's stunning. But here's the thing that will really interest you. She doesn't seem to know how beautiful she is. She keeps her head down, doesn't try to use her looks to get help from people. Marcus was intrigued. Where does she usually spend her time? During the day, she's at the downtown public library. In the evenings, she volunteers at St. Mary's Soup Kitchen on 5th Street. At night, she sleeps in an alley behind the old theater on Main Street. I've been watching her routine for 3 days. Marcus felt uncomfortable about the stalking aspect of their plan, but he pushed those feelings aside. So what's the approach? How do I meet her naturally? David had thought this through carefully. Tomorrow is Thursday. She always volunteers at the soup kitchen from 5 to 8 p.m. You show up there around 7, pretend you're hungry and homeless too. Strike up a conversation, maybe offer to help with something. Build a connection slowly. Marcus spent the next day preparing for his role. He went shopping at thrift stores, something he had never done in his life. He bought worn jeans, an old jacket with holes in the elbows, and scuffed shoes that looked like they had walked 1,000 miles. He practiced speaking differently, trying to sound less educated and refined. He even went without shaving for several days to look more rugged. Thursday evening arrived, and Marcus felt nervous in a way he hadn't experienced since his first business presentation. He drove his oldest car, a 5-year-old sedan that he usually only used when he wanted to appear modest, to within a few blocks of the soup kitchen. Then he walked the rest of the way, trying to adopt the posture and gait of someone who had been worn down by life. St. Mary's Soup Kitchen was located in the basement of an old church. The room smelled like vegetable soup and cleaning supplies. About 30 people were scattered around plastic tables eating from paper bowls. Marcus saw volunteers moving between the tables, refilling bowls and cleaning up spills. And then he saw Elena. David had not exaggerated her beauty. Despite her circumstances, despite the simple ponytail and the volunteer apron that was too big for her small frame, Elena was breathtaking. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that struck Marcus. It was the gentle way she spoke to each person she served, the genuine smile she offered to everyone, the patient way she helped an elderly man whose hands shook too much to hold his spoon properly. Marcus stood in the doorway for several minutes, just watching Elena work. She moved with grace and purpose, treating each homeless person with dignity and respect. He watched her laugh at an old woman's joke, help a young man find a chair, and carefully clean up a spill without making the person who caused it feel embarrassed. Finally, Marcus forced himself to move. He got in line for food, his heart beating faster as he approached Elena's station. When his turn came, she looked up at him with warm brown eyes and smiled. "Good evening," she said softly. "We have vegetable soup tonight, and there's fresh bread if you'd like some." Marcus found himself momentarily speechless. Up close, Elena was even more beautiful, but more than that, her kindness seemed genuine. There was no judgment in her eyes as she looked at his shabby clothes, no pity or disgust. Just human warmth. "That sounds good," Marcus managed to say, trying to remember to speak less formally. "Thank you." Elena ladled soup into his bowl, her movements careful and practiced. "Are you new to the area?" "I haven't seen you here before." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, just got into town a few days ago. Still figuring things out." "Well, you're welcome here anytime," Elena said. "We serve dinner every evening from 5 to 8. And if you need other resources, there's a bulletin board over there with information about shelters and job assistance programs." As Marcus walked away with his bowl of soup, he felt something he hadn't expected: genuine gratitude. The soup was simple but warm and filling. More importantly, Elena had treated him with kindness without knowing anything about him except that he appeared to need help. Marcus sat at a corner table, eating his soup and watching Elena continue her work. She never seemed to get tired or impatient, even when dealing with difficult people. One man complained loudly about the soup being too salty, but Elena just smiled and offered to get him some crackers to help with the taste. Another person accidentally knocked over his water cup, but Elena was there immediately with paper towels, cleaning up the mess while telling the embarrassed man that accidents happen to everyone. As the evening wound down, Marcus saw his opportunity. Elena was stacking chairs and cleaning tables. He approached her hesitantly. "Can I help with something?" he asked. "I'd like to return the favor for the meal." Elena looked surprised. "Oh, you don't need to do that. You're a guest here." "I insist," Marcus said. "I may not have much, but I can stack chairs and wipe tables." Elena smiled, and Marcus felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with the bet. "That's very kind of you. I'm Elena, by the way." "Marcus," he replied, then caught himself. He had planned to use a fake name, but somehow his real name had slipped out. They worked together for the next hour, cleaning up the kitchen and preparing for the next day. Elena moved efficiently but never seemed rushed. She asked Marcus about his background, and he found himself telling her a carefully constructed story about being down on his luck, looking for work, and having nowhere to stay. "I'm sorry things have been difficult for you," Elena said as they finished up. "But don't give up hope. Sometimes when everything seems darkest, that's when things are about to turn around." Marcus was struck by her optimism despite her own circumstances. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter about life, yet she was encouraging him. As they prepared to leave, Elena hesitated for a moment, then said, "Marcus, I know we just met, but if you need somewhere safe to spend the night, there's a spot behind the old theater where a few of us stay. It's not much, but it's sheltered and relatively safe." Marcus realized she was offering to share her sleeping space with a stranger. The generosity of the gesture left him momentarily speechless. Marcus accepted Elena's offer to share the sheltered space behind the theater, though he had no intention of actually spending the night there. He walked with her through the cold December streets, listening as she pointed out various landmarks and shared information about which areas were safe and which ones to avoid. "That restaurant there throws away good food every night around 10, Elena explained as they passed a small cafe. "The owner doesn't mind if people go through the dumpster, as long as we don't make a mess. And the security guard at that office building is kind. He sometimes lets people sit in the lobby when it's really cold. Marcus found himself fascinated by Elena's knowledge of street survival. She had created an entire map of the city based on kindness and safety, knowing which people and places offered help and which ones posed danger. Despite living in the same city his entire life, Marcus was seeing it through completely different eyes. The space behind the theater was exactly as Elena had described, a small alcove protected from wind and rain, with several cardboard pieces laid out as makeshift bedding. 2 other people were already there, an elderly man Elena introduced as Charlie and a young woman named Sarah who couldn't have been older than 20. "Everyone, this is Marcus," Elena said. "He's new to town and needs a safe place to stay tonight." Charlie and Sarah welcomed Marcus without question, immediately making space for him and offering to share their meager supplies. Charlie had an extra blanket, which he insisted Marcus take despite Marcus's protests. Sarah had found some unopened snacks from a convenience store dumpster and shared them freely. Marcus was overwhelmed by the generosity of these people, who had virtually nothing yet were willing to share everything. It contradicted every assumption he had ever made about human nature and desperation. In his world, people with billions would argue over millions. Here, people with nothing shared their nothing without hesitation. As they settled in for the night, Elena sat beside Marcus on a piece of cardboard. "Tell me about yourself, Marcus. What kind of work did you do before things got difficult?" Marcus had prepared a story about being a warehouse worker who lost his job when the company downsized. As he told the lie, he watched Elena's face carefully, looking for signs that she was judging him or calculating his worth. Instead, she listened with genuine interest and empathy. "That must have been so hard," Elena said when he finished, "especially right before the holidays. But you seem strong and smart. I bet you'll find something soon." "What about you?" Marcus asked. "How did you end up here?" Elena's story was heartbreaking. She had worked as a nurse's assistant at a small clinic that served low-income patients. When the clinic lost its funding, Elena lost her job and her small apartment. With no family to turn to and no savings, she quickly found herself on the streets. "I keep applying for jobs," Elena said, "but it's hard when you don't have an address or nice clothes for interviews. Still, I know something will come up. It has to." Marcus wanted to ask why she didn't try to use her beauty to find help, why she didn't flirt with men who might offer her money or shelter in exchange for companionship. But he already knew Elena well enough to understand that such behavior would never occur to her. She had moral standards that she refused to compromise even when faced with homelessness. As the night grew colder, Marcus excused himself, claiming he needed to find a bathroom. Instead, he walked to where he had parked his car and called David. "How did it go?" David asked immediately. Marcus found himself struggling to answer. "She's not what I expected." "What do you mean? Is she not interested? Did she ask you for money?" "No, David, she offered to give me money." "Well, not money exactly, but food, shelter, blankets. She and her friends shared everything they had with a complete stranger. They have nothing and they're giving it away." David was quiet for a moment. "That doesn't change anything, Marcus. She's probably just being strategic, building trust so she can ask for bigger things later. Stick to the plan." Marcus wanted to argue, but he wasn't ready to admit that he might have been wrong about people. "I'll continue the experiment," he said. "But David, these people aren't what we thought. They're genuinely good." "Just remember the bet," David replied. $1 million says she'll show her true colors eventually." Marcus returned to the alley where Elena had arranged the cardboard and blankets to create a warmer space. She had given up her own blanket to make him more comfortable, and when Marcus protested, she simply said that she was used to the cold and he wasn't. They talked quietly for hours, their conversation ranging from books they had read to dreams they still held despite their circumstances. Marcus discovered that Elena was intelligent and well-educated, having graduated from nursing school with honors before financial difficulties forced her to drop out. She spoke about wanting to return to healthcare, about her dream of opening a clinic for homeless people who often couldn't access medical care. "Most people see homeless folks as lazy or dangerous," Elena said softly, "but they don't understand that anyone can end up here. A job loss, a medical emergency, a family crisis, life can change so quickly. These people just need someone to believe in them again." Marcus found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. His loneliness despite his wealth, his struggle to find genuine connections. his fear that no one would ever love the real him. Of course, he framed these feelings in terms of his fake persona, but the emotions were entirely real. "I understand feeling invisible," Elena said. "When you're homeless, people look right through you like you don't exist. But you do exist, Marcus. You matter. And I can tell you're a good person just by how you offered to help at the soup kitchen tonight." As dawn approached, Marcus realized he had to leave before his charade became impossible to maintain. He told Elena he had a job interview that morning, which was actually true. He had a board meeting at his company. "That's wonderful," Elena said, genuinely excited for him. "I'll be thinking good thoughts for you." Before leaving, Elena did something that completely surprised Marcus. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, clearly her only money. "Take this," she said, pressing the bill into his hand. "For bus fare to your interview, or maybe to buy a coffee so you feel more confident." Marcus stared at the money, knowing it probably represented everything Elena had in the world. "I can't take this, Elena. You need it more than I do." "Please," Elena insisted. "I want to help. Besides, when you get the job, you can pay it forward to someone else who needs help." Marcus took the money, his throat tight with emotion he didn't understand. This woman, who had nothing, was giving him her everything because she believed in him and wanted him to succeed. It was the most generous gift anyone had ever given him, worth more than all the expensive presents he had received in his lifetime. As Marcus walked away, Elena called after him. "Good luck, Marcus. And remember, you're always welcome at the soup kitchen. We're like a family there." Marcus spent the drive home in stunned silence, Elena's $5 bill burning in his pocket like a hot coal. Everything he thought he knew about human nature was being challenged by this extraordinary woman who treated strangers like family and gave away her last dollar to help someone she barely knew. For the first time since making the bet, Marcus began to hope that he would lose. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus found himself living a double life that was both exhilarating and exhausting. During the day, he ran Wellington Industries, making million-dollar decisions and attending board meetings in his expensive suits. In the evenings, he transformed into his homeless persona and spent time with Elena, helping at the soup kitchen and learning about a world he had never imagined existed. Each interaction with Elena revealed new depths to her character that left Marcus amazed. She never complained about her circumstances, never seemed bitter about the unfairness of life, and never stopped helping others despite having so little herself. Marcus watched her give away food when she was hungry, share her only coat with someone who was colder, and spend her spare time reading to elderly homeless people who struggled with poor eyesight. The relationship between Marcus and Elena developed naturally and beautifully. They began spending more time together after the soup kitchen closed, walking through the city and talking about everything from philosophy to their dreams for the future. Elena shared stories about her childhood in foster care, her determination to become a nurse despite the obstacles, and her hope that someday she would be stable enough to help other people escape homelessness. Marcus found himself falling for Elena in a way he had never experienced before. This wasn't the shallow attraction he had felt for the wealthy women in his past, based on physical beauty and social status. This was something deeper: admiration for Elena's strength, respect for her character, and a growing love for the person she was at her core. For the first time in his life, Marcus was building a relationship based on genuine connection rather than material benefits. But the deception was eating at him. Every kind gesture Elena made, every moment of vulnerability she shared, every demonstration of her genuine feelings for him made Marcus feel worse about the lie he was living. He wanted desperately to tell her the truth about who he was, but he was terrified that learning about his wealth would change everything between them. David called regularly to check on the progress of the bet. "So when are you going to propose?" he asked during one of their conversations. "It's been 3 weeks, Marcus. You can't string this along forever." Marcus had been dreading this question. "I need more time, David. I want to be sure about her feelings." "Her feelings?" David laughed. "Marcus, this is a bet, remember? You're trying to prove that she'll show her true colors. When are you going to give her the opportunity to do that?" The truth was that Marcus no longer wanted Elena to fail his test. He wanted her to pass, wanted to believe that she was different from every other woman he had known. But David was right about one thing: he couldn't continue the deception indefinitely. That evening, As Marcus and Elena walked through downtown after volunteering at the soup kitchen, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. "Elena," he said, stopping suddenly on the sidewalk, "I need to tell you something important." Elena looked at him with concern. "What is it, Marcus? You look so serious." Marcus took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I love you, Elena. I know it's crazy because we haven't known each other very long, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore. You're the most incredible person I've ever met." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Marcus, I love you too. I have for weeks now. I was afraid to say anything because our situation is so complicated, but you make me feel like anything is possible." Marcus felt a surge of joy mixed with guilt. Elena loved him, but she loved the fictional version of him, not the real Marcus Wellington III. Still, he pressed forward with his plan. "Elena, I want us to be together officially. I want to marry you." Elena stared at him in shock. "Marry me?" Marcus were both homeless. "We don't have money for a wedding or even for a marriage license." Marcus had anticipated this objection. "I know it seems impossible, but I've been thinking about this constantly. We don't need a fancy wedding. We just need each other. I can find a way to get the money for a license. Maybe I can sell something or find some odd jobs." Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus held his breath waiting for her response. Finally she spoke, her voice soft and emotional. "Marcus, yes. Yes, I'll marry you. I don't care that we have nothing. I don't care that other people might think we're crazy. I love you, and that's enough for me." Marcus felt a complex mixture of triumph and shame. Elena had agreed to marry him despite believing he had nothing to offer her materially. This proved definitively that she was capable of loving someone without regard for wealth or status. But it also meant that his deception had succeeded, and now he would have to figure out how to handle the consequences. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking excitedly about their future together. Elena spoke about wanting to find a small apartment where they could both look for better jobs, about saving money to eventually return to nursing school, about building a life based on love and mutual support, rather than material possessions. "I know it won't be easy," Elena said as they sat on a bench overlooking the city. "But I'd rather struggle with you than have comfort with anyone else. You understand me, Marcus. You see who I really am, and you love me anyway." Marcus felt his heart breaking as he realized the irony of Elena's words. She thought he understood and accepted her, but she had no idea who he really was. The very thing she valued most about their relationship, the honesty and authenticity, was built on a foundation of lies. Over the next few days, Marcus struggled with what to do next. He could go through with the marriage while maintaining his false identity, but that seemed cruel to Elena and would eventually become impossible to sustain. He could reveal his true identity and hope Elena would understand and forgive the deception. But he was terrified that learning about his wealth would change her feelings or make her question everything they had built together. Meanwhile, David was growing impatient. "You won the bet, Marcus. She agreed to marry you thinking you're poor. Now end this experiment and collect your proof that you were right about human nature." But Marcus no longer cared about the bet or being right. All he cared about was Elena and the love they had discovered together. He had set out to prove that no woman could love him without his money. But instead he had found a woman who loved him despite believing he had no money at all. The problem was that this woman had fallen in love with someone who didn't really exist. The homeless man Elena loved was just a character Marcus had created. The real Marcus Wellington III, wealthy, privileged, and living a life of luxury, was someone Elena had never met. As their wedding day approached, Marcus knew he had to make a choice that would determine not only the outcome of his cruel bet, but the entire course of his life. He could continue living the lie and build his marriage on deception, or he could risk losing everything by telling Elena the truth about who he really was. The decision was tearing him apart, because for the first time in his life, Marcus had found something more valuable than money: genuine love. And he was terrified that revealing his wealth would destroy the very thing that had finally made him feel truly rich. The wedding was planned for a Saturday afternoon at the small chapel next to St. Mary's Soup Kitchen. Father Miguel, who had been impressed by Elena's volunteer work and touched by their love story, agreed to perform the ceremony for free. Charlie and Sarah would serve as witnesses, and the reception would be nothing more than cake and coffee in the church basement. Marcus had arranged everything while maintaining his homeless persona, though behind the scenes he had used his resources carefully. He purchased Elena's wedding dress through an intermediary, telling her he had found it at a thrift shop. He paid for the marriage license with money he claimed to have earned from odd jobs. Every detail was orchestrated to maintain the illusion while giving Elena the wedding she deserved. 3 days before the ceremony, Marcus knew he couldn't go through with the deception any longer. The weight of his lies had become unbearable, and he realized that marrying Elena under false pretenses would be the cruelest thing he could do to her. She deserved to know who she was really marrying, even if it meant risking everything they had built together. Marcus spent hours planning what he would say and how he would reveal the truth. He decided to tell Elena everything, about the bet, about his real identity, about his initial cynical motivations, and about how she had changed his understanding of love and human nature. It was a gamble that could cost him the only real love he had ever known. But Elena deserved honesty. On Wednesday evening, after they finished their volunteer work at the soup kitchen, Marcus asked Elena to take a walk with him. His heart was pounding as they walked through the quiet streets, and Elena seemed to sense his nervousness. "Marcus, you've been acting strange all week," Elena said, stopping to face him. "What's wrong?" "Are you having second thoughts about the wedding?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Elena, I need to tell you something that's going to shock you. It's about who I really am." Elena looked concerned but not scared. "Whatever it is, Marcus, we can work through it. I love you no matter what." "I haven't been honest with you," Marcus began, his voice shaking. "I'm not really homeless, Elena. I'm not poor and I don't need a job. I'm actually very wealthy. My name is Marcus Wellington III and I own Wellington Industries." Elena stared at him in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus, that doesn't make any sense." "Why would you pretend to be homeless?" Marcus forced himself to continue, knowing that each word might be destroying his chance at happiness. "It started as a bet with my friends. They bet me that no woman would marry me if I didn't have money. I was so cynical about love, so convinced that women only wanted me for my wealth, that I accepted the challenge. I was supposed to find someone who would marry me while thinking I was poor, just to prove that such a woman didn't exist." The color drained from Elena's face as the implications of Marcus's words sank in. "A bet? You approached me as part of a bet?" "Yes," Marcus whispered, hating himself for the pain he saw in Elena's eyes. "But Elena, everything changed. I was supposed to be proving that you would eventually show greed or selfishness, but instead you showed me something I had never seen before. Pure selfless love. You changed everything I believed about human nature." Elena stepped back from him, her eyes filling with tears. "So everything between us has been a lie? Every moment we've shared, every conversation, every time you told me you loved me, it was all part of some game?" "No," Marcus said desperately. "My feelings for you are completely real. I do love you, Elena. More than I've ever loved anyone. You have to believe that." "How can I believe anything you say?" Elena's voice was breaking. "For weeks I've been sharing my deepest thoughts and feelings with someone who was lying to me about everything. I told you things I've never told anyone, and you were just collecting information to win a bet." Marcus felt his world crashing down around him. "Elena, please listen to me. Yes, it started as a bet, but it became real. You showed me that love isn't about money or status. You loved me when you thought I had nothing, and that means everything to me. But I didn't love you," Elena said, her voice hollow. "I loved someone who doesn't exist. The Marcus I fell in love with was kind and humble, and understood what it meant to struggle. You're a millionaire who was pretending to be homeless for entertainment." "I am kind," Marcus pleaded, "and I do understand struggle now because of you. Elena, you changed me. The person you fell in love with, that's who I really am underneath all the money and privilege. You brought out the best version of myself." Elena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "How do I know what's real and what's pretend? You're obviously a very good actor, Marcus. You fooled me completely." Marcus felt desperate as he watched the woman he loved slipping away from him. "Let me prove it to you. Let me show you that my feelings are genuine." "How?" Elena asked bitterly. "By buying me expensive things? By offering to solve all my problems with your money? That's exactly what you expected me to want, isn't it?" "No, Elena. I expected you to be like every other woman I'd known, but you proved me completely wrong. You never asked for anything. You gave me everything you had, including your heart. without expecting anything in return. Elena wiped her tears with the back of her hand. And what happens now, Marcus? Do you go back to your mansion and laugh with your friends about the homeless woman who was stupid enough to fall for your act? Never, Marcus said firmly. Elena, I want to marry you. Not because of the bet, but because I love you. The bet is meaningless now. You won, Elena. You proved that real love exists. I won? Elena's voice was filled with hurt and anger. What did I win, Marcus? The knowledge that the man I love has been lying to me from the moment we met? The understanding that our entire relationship is built on deception? Marcus reached for her, but Elena stepped back. Please don't touch me. I need time to think about this. Elena, the wedding is in 3 days. I know you're hurt and you have every right to be angry with me. But please don't let my mistakes destroy what we have. Underneath all the lies about my circumstances, my love for you is the most honest thing I've ever felt. Elena looked at him with eyes full of pain. You say you love me, but you don't even know me, Marcus. The Elena you think you love only exists in contrast to your homeless persona. You love the idea of a woman who could love you without money. But who am I when I'm not serving as proof of your theory about human nature? Marcus realized that Elena was right. He had been so focused on what she represented, proof that genuine love existed, that he had never considered how his deception affected her as a person. She wasn't just a character in his experiment. She was a real woman with real feelings who had been manipulated and deceived. You're right, Marcus said quietly. I've been selfish and cruel. I never thought about how this would hurt you. I only thought about what I needed to prove to myself. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, looking small and vulnerable. Do you have any idea what it's like to finally find someone who understands your life, who shares your struggles, who sees you as an equal? And then to discover that it was all pretend? Marcus felt ashamed as he realized the full extent of what he had done to Elena. She hadn't just fallen in love with him, she had found what she thought was a true partner, who understood her world and her challenges. Learning that he was actually from a completely different world must feel like a betrayal beyond his comprehension. I can't undo what I've done, Marcus said, but Elena, please give me a chance to make it right. Let me show you that the man you fell in love with is real, even if his circumstances weren't. Elena was quiet for a long time, and Marcus could see her struggling with conflicting emotions. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I need time, Marcus. I need to figure out what's real and what isn't. I need to understand who you really are, not just the homeless version or the millionaire version, but the actual person underneath all of that. Does that mean you'll give us a chance? Marcus asked hopefully. Elena looked at him with sad eyes. I don't know. Right now, I don't even know if I can trust my own feelings because they were based on someone who doesn't exist. Marcus felt a crushing weight in his chest. What about the wedding? There can't be a wedding, Marcus, not now. Not until I figure out if there's anything real left between us after all the lies. As Elena walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone on the dark street, he realized that his cruel bet had backfired in the worst possible way. He had set out to prove that no woman could love him for who he truly was, and instead he had found a woman who could love him completely. But he had destroyed that love through his deception. For the first time in his life, Marcus understood what it meant to lose something truly valuable. All his money, all his success, all his material possessions meant nothing compared to the love he had just lost through his own selfishness and cynicism. 3 months passed after that devastating night, when Marcus revealed his true identity to Elena. 3 months of silence, of Elena refusing to see him or accept his calls. Marcus had never experienced such profound emptiness. Despite being surrounded by luxury, he wandered through his penthouse like a ghost, unable to find joy in anything that had once given him pleasure. David called regularly to check on him, but Marcus no longer wanted to discuss the bet or claim his victory. You won, Marcus, David would say. She proved she could love you without money. You can collect your $1 million and move on. But Marcus didn't want the money and he couldn't move on. He had learned something that David and his other friends couldn't understand. Winning the bet meant nothing if it cost him the love that made his life worth living. During those long, lonely months, Marcus threw himself into learning about Elena's world. He volunteered at soup kitchens across the city, not as part of any deception, but because he genuinely wanted to understand the community Elena belonged to. He donated anonymously to homeless shelters and job training programs. He established a foundation to help people transitioning out of homelessness, though he was careful to keep his involvement secret. Through his volunteer work, Marcus occasionally heard news about Elena. She had found a job at a medical clinic and was slowly rebuilding her life. She had moved into a small studio apartment and was saving money to return to nursing school. People spoke of her with admiration and affection, just as they always had. Charlie and Sarah, Elena's friends from the alley behind the theater, eventually learned about Marcus's true identity. Their reaction surprised him. Instead of anger, they seemed more confused and sad. Why would someone with everything pretend to have nothing? Charlie asked during one of Marcus's volunteer shifts. What kind of life must you have lived to think that was necessary? Sarah was more direct. You broke Elena's heart, you know. She really loved you, whoever you were. It took her weeks to stop crying. Marcus carried the weight of that knowledge with him every day. He had caused pain to the most innocent person he had ever known, someone who had shown him nothing but kindness and love. 4 months after their last conversation, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't continue living with the knowledge that he had hurt Elena without at least trying to make amends. He wrote her a letter pouring out his heart and explaining everything he had learned about himself and about love during their time apart. In the letter, Marcus didn't ask Elena to forgive him or take him back. Instead, he apologized sincerely for his deception and thanked her for showing him what genuine love looked like. He told her about the foundation he had started and the volunteer work he was doing, not to impress her, but to show her that she had changed him in ways that would last forever. Marcus also made Elena an offer that surprised even himself. He wanted to give her $1 million, the same amount David had bet, with no strings attached. Not as charity, not as an attempt to buy her forgiveness, but as acknowledgement of what she had taught him and compensation for the pain he had caused. You showed me something worth more than any amount of money, Marcus wrote. You showed me that love doesn't have a price tag, and that human connection is the only thing that truly matters. I can never repay what you gave me, but I want you to have the resources to build the life you deserve and to help others the way you helped me. Marcus sent the letter through Father Miguel at the church, asking him to give it to Elena only if he thought it was appropriate. He waited anxiously for any response, but none came. 2 weeks later, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his office. Elena walked into his penthouse suite wearing simple but professional clothes, looking beautiful and dignified, despite the obvious tension in her posture. Hello, Marcus, she said quietly. I got your letter. Marcus stood up from his desk, his heart racing. Elena, you look wonderful. I'm so glad you're doing well. I came to return this, Elena said, pulling an envelope from her purse. I can't accept your money. Marcus shook his head. Elena, that money means nothing to me, but it could change your life. You could finish nursing school, maybe start that clinic you dreamed about. I'll finish nursing school on my own, Elena replied firmly. And if I start a clinic someday, it will be because I earned the right to do it, not because someone gave it to me out of guilt. Marcus admired her strength and integrity, even as his heart broke a little more. I understand. But Elena, I want you to know that I meant everything I wrote in that letter. You changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face. I've been thinking about what you said, about the person I fell in love with being real underneath all the lies. I've been trying to figure out if that's true. And what did you decide? Marcus asked softly. I think that person was real, Elena said slowly, but I also think he was someone you became because of the situation you put yourself in. When you were pretending to be homeless, you had to rely on qualities you had never used before: humility, gratitude, genuine connection with people. The question is whether that person can exist when you're being Marcus Wellington III. Marcus felt a surge of hope. I'd like to show you that he can. Elena shook her head. I'm not ready for that, Marcus. I may never be ready for that. What you did to me was cruel, even if you didn't intend it to be. You made me fall in love with someone who didn't exist. But he did exist, Marcus insisted. He exists right now standing in front of you, does he? Elena asked challengingly. Because the man I loved would never have approached someone vulnerable for the purpose of proving a cynical point about human nature. The man I loved would never have built a relationship on lies, no matter what his justification was. Marcus realized that Elena was right. The homeless persona he had created had been kinder and more genuine than his real self, but it had also been built on a foundation of deception and manipulation that the real Marcus had constructed. He couldn't separate the good qualities from the cruel intentions that had created the situation. "You're right," Marcus admitted. "I can't undo what I did or change the reasons I did it. I can only try to be better going forward." Elena nodded. "I hope you do try to be better, Marcus. I hope you find a way to be genuinely kind without needing to pretend to be someone else, and I hope you find real love someday built on honesty instead of deception." "I already found real love," Marcus said quietly. "I just destroyed it through my own selfishness." Elena's eyes softened for a moment, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the woman who had once loved him. But then she straightened her shoulders and prepared to leave. "Goodbye, Marcus," Elena said. "Thank you for teaching me that I'm strong enough to survive having my heart broken. It's a lesson I didn't want to learn, but I'm grateful for it now." As Elena walked out of his office, Marcus realized that she had given him one final gift, the knowledge that some mistakes can't be undone, but they can still lead to growth and wisdom. He had lost the love of his life, but he had gained something he had never possessed before: genuine humility and an understanding of what truly mattered in life. Marcus never won his bet, because he never collected the $1 million from David. He didn't win Elena back either. But in losing everything that he thought he wanted, Marcus discovered something he had never expected to find. The man Elena had fallen in love with was real, and he was someone worth becoming, even if it was too late to save the relationship that had created him. Years later, Marcus would sometimes see Elena at community events or volunteer functions. She became a successful nurse practitioner and eventually opened a clinic serving homeless and low-income patients. They would nod politely to each other but never spoke again. Marcus never married, though not for lack of opportunity. He had learned to recognize genuine connection when he found it, and he never found anything that compared to what he had experienced with Elena. Instead, he devoted his life to the foundation he had started in her honor, working quietly to help others without expecting recognition or gratitude. The cruel bet that had begun as an attempt to prove his cynical view of human nature had taught Marcus the most important lesson of his life: that love, when it's real, is worth more than any amount of money. And sometimes the price of learning that lesson is losing the very love that taught it to you.